So, picture this. You wake up and it is like 3 a.m.
Oh, the classic middle of the night wake up.
Right. Your eyes just snap open and your brain is suddenly on fire with this brilliant business idea.
It feels like absolute magic in that moment, doesn't it?
It really does. You can already see the logo, the big launch party, the success. So you get out of bed, you make a pot of coffee, and you just get straight to work.
You're all in.
Exactly. You spend the next 6 months skipping weekend barbecues with your friends. You quietly empty out your hard-earned savings account.
Ouch, yeah.
Yeah, and you spend night after night building this brilliant thing out in your freezing garage, just pouring every ounce of your soul into it. And then finally, the big day arrives.
The launch.
Right? You throw open the garage doors, you launch it to the world, and you hear nothing. Just absolute deafening crickets.
Oh, man, that is the worst feeling.
Nobody cares. Nobody is buying. It is this crushing, incredibly expensive nightmare. But, well, here's the thing. It is also completely avoidable. We are going to make sure you never waste your time or your money on an idea that nobody actually wants.
Today's pure biz adrenaline lesson is 7 scrappy rules to validate your business idea.
Yeah, we are walking you through 7 gritty, real-world rules to pressure test your light bulb moment.
And no boardroom buzzwords here.
No, not at all. Just practical advice you could discuss over coffee. We are going to strip away the whole fantasy of entrepreneurship and look at the actual mechanics of what works. Starting right off with number 1, solve an actual problem.
Yes. This has to be the foundation of everything you do. I mean, you have to build what people are actively looking for and what they genuinely need in their daily lives.
Which sounds so obvious,
It
right?
sounds incredibly obvious when you say it out loud. You would think it goes without saying. Yet, if you look at the track record of failed businesses, you would be shocked at how consistently this core principle just gets completely ignored.
Like we just forget about it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We get entirely caught up in creating something clever or, something shiny with a beautiful interface
Mm-hmm.
that we completely bypass the fundamental question of utility.
Right.
If there is no real-world headache being cured, there's no real-world business to build.
I always picture it like inventing a rain jacket for a fish.
A rain jacket for a fish.
Yeah, like you could spend an entire year designing this thing. You could source the most high-tech, breathable, waterproof materials on the planet.
Oh, COVID.
You could stitch it perfectly, manufacture it in all these vibrant colors, put it in an incredible box. It could be an absolute masterpiece of an invention.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, the fish is already wet.
Right.
The fish does not care. It doesn't need a jacket.
Well.
Sure, it's a clever invention, but the customer has zero use for it. So why do you think so many incredibly smart people fall into that trap of building the fish jacket?
It happens all the time.
Is there like a psychological reason we get so blinded by our own cleverness that we just stop looking at the market?
There absolutely is. And it really comes down to the biology of invention.
Really? Biology.
Yeah. When you have that 3 a.m. light bulb moment, your brain hits you with a massive rush of dopamine.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. You fall in love with the rush. You fall in love with your own cleverness, the design, the specific features, the whole fantasy of being a visionary.
Which is intoxicating.
It is. But successful businesses don't fall in love with the solution. They fall in love with the customer's headache.
I love that. Fall in love with the headache.
Exactly. If you are deeply focused on understanding the headache, you will always build something people need. If you just focus on your clever rain jacket, you just end up staring at a very confused fish.
So if the dopamine from inventing that fish jacket is blinding you, how do you take off the blinders?
Well, you have to let reality shatter your assumptions. Moving on to number 2, get real customer feedback.
Okay, so talking to actual people,
Yes, this means you need to talk to your target users before you build a single thing.
not after.
Not after you build it. Not halfway through when you're starting to doubt yourself. Before. You need to get out of the isolation of your garage, look actual human beings in the eye, and ask them about the problem you were trying to solve.
Right.
You have to understand their daily struggles, their frustrations, and crucially, what they are currently doing to fix the issue. You are gathering vital clues and evidence before you commit a single dollar of your resources.
But wait, I need to stop you there because this brings up a massive fear for a lot of aspiring builders.
The stolen idea fear.
Yes. Let's say I have this brilliant $1 million idea. If I go around telling people about it, interviewing strangers before the product is even built, won't someone just steal it?
It is such a common fear.
Right. Why wouldn't a larger company with more resources just take my concept and crush me?
That fear of the stolen idea is probably the single most common roadblock out there. And we really need to ground ourselves in the harsh reality of execution.
Okay, hit me with the reality.
The uncomfortable truth is that ideas themselves are cheap. They are a dime a dozen.
Wow, really?
Yeah, an idea is just a multiplier. The actual execution is where the value lives. Building a business is incredibly painful, exhausting work. It takes relentless daily effort over years.
It's a grind.
It is a massive grind. So the odds of a random stranger hearing your idea and deciding to drop everything in their life to endure the years of grueling work required to build it.
You're slim.
It is practically zero. People have their own lives, their own debts, their own problems to worry about.
They aren't waiting around to steal your homework.
Exactly. Building in a lonely room based entirely on your own unverified guesses is 1,000 times more dangerous than the threat of a phantom copycat.
That is a great way to put it.
The isolation will kill your business far faster than a competitor ever could. You need the oxygen of real human feedback to survive.
But, getting verbal feedback is one thing. Eventually, you have to put something physical in their hands to see how they react.
Absolutely.
But I think the trap is assuming that something has to be a polished, finished product. Test before you invest.
Oh, this is a big one.
It really is. The core truth here is that you need to offer your service manually before you go out and buy expensive tools or fancy software.
People love to skip this step.
Because it is so deeply tempting to play business. You know the feeling. You want to buy the domain name, set up the LLC, get the premium software subscriptions, hire a designer for the logo.
It feels productive.
It feels incredibly productive, but it is just a simulation. You are spending money without proving the concept. You have to force yourself to do the absolute bare minimum, usually by hand, to see if the core service holds any actual value.
I love using a neighborhood bakery as the classic example for this.
Okay, tell me about the bakery.
Let's say you have a dream of opening a massive, amazing bakery. The fatal mistake is taking out a huge bank loan to buy a $30,000 commercial bakery oven before you have successfully sold a single batch of cookies.
Yikes. That is a heavy debt.
Right. So you do it the hard, slow, manual way first. Bake a small batch in your own little kitchen oven. Put them in plain brown paper bags. Walk down the street and try to sell them.
Get out there on the pavement.
Prove that folks actually want to eat what you are making. And prove they will hand you $1 for it. If you can't sell the cookies baked in your kitchen oven, a $30,000 commercial oven is not going to save you.
It just means you fail faster.
It will just accelerate your bankruptcy.
I hear that, but let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
A bakery is a physical good. Doing things manually in a kitchen makes perfect sense. But what if I'm trying to build a massive tech platform?
Yeah.
Like if I want to build the next great ride-sharing app or a complex software tool, baking cookies in my kitchen feels completely irrelevant. How does manual testing apply to technology where the whole point is automation?
That is a really great challenge. But the principle holds perfectly for tech too. We call it the concierge test.
The concierge test.
Yeah. Before you write a single line of code to automate a process, you perform the service manually behind the scenes.
Like you pretend to be the software.
Exactly. If you want to build an app that matches dog walkers with dog owners, you don't spend $50,000 coding an algorithm. You put up a basic one-page site with a phone number.
Oh, I see.
When someone calls looking for a dog walker, you personally call around to find one and manually connect them. You act as the software.
That sounds exhausting, but smart.
It forces you to learn the actual friction points of the transaction.
Yeah.
If you can't manually convince a dog owner to trust a walker over the phone, no algorithm in the world will magically fix that lack of trust.
Wow. And when you run things manually like that, reality just hits you right in the face.
It does.
And doing it manually means you are getting that face-to-face feedback instantly, rather than hiding behind a glossy website. The real question is whether you have the stomach to actually listen when the market tells you that your original vision was wrong.
Which brings us right to the next rule. Next up is number 4. Iterate and adapt quickly. Yeah. This is where the rubber meets the road. This means launching your manual test fast and making immediate changes based on real-world actions.
Not waiting around for months.
Exactly. We aren't talking about complex data analysis here. This is simply about watching what people actually do in the real world rather than what you hoped they would do and adjusting your approach.
You just tweak it as you go.
You throw your imperfect manual test out there, you watch how the world reacts, and you tweak it instantly.
To bring back your bakery example, this is exactly what happens when you sell those first manual batches of cookies.
Right, you walk down the street.
Yeah, you walk down the street, and maybe a few people buy them, but they consistently tell you, these chocolate chip cookies are okay, but I would really love a blueberry muffin right now.
The feedback loop in action.
Exactly. You hear that twice, 3 times, 4 times. Adapting quickly means you immediately swallow your pride, go back to your kitchen and change the recipe. You start baking muffins.
But swallowing that pride is incredibly difficult for founders.
It is emotionally devastating. We are dealing with the sunk cost fallacy. You spent months perfecting that cookie recipe. You identified as a cookie baker.
Yes.
So instead of adapting, founders will often try to educate the customer. They want to hand the customer a 5-page essay on why their chocolate chip cookies are historically and nutritionally superior to muffins.
They stubbornly force cookies on muffin people.
Exactly. You have to leave your ego at the door. If the street wants muffins, you become a muffin baker. That is the gritty reality of adapting.
And even if you do successfully swallow your pride and start baking muffins, you still run into the most dangerous illusion in the entire business landscape.
Yeah.
False praise.
Oh, that is a big one. Here's number 5. Look for buying intent.
This is where we have to deliver some serious tough love.
Bring on.
We talk endlessly about validating an idea, but true validation really only means one thing. Someone actually opens their wallet. They reach into their pocket, pull out their credit card or their cash, and they physically hand it to you. That transaction is the only absolute, undeniable proof that your solution solves a real problem.
See, I push back on this all the time with people I mentor. They always tell me, but people tell me they love my idea. They say it's brilliant and that they would totally use it. Isn't that enough validation to keep going?
It feels incredibly validating to hear that, but it is absolutely not enough. You have to account for human psychology.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, we are socially wired to avoid conflict. Your friends, your family, your coworkers, and even strangers on the street, they are generally good people. They want to maintain social harmony.
They don't want to hurt your feelings.
Exactly. They don't want to look you in the eye and crush your dreams. So they will smile, nod enthusiastically, and say they love your idea just to be nice. It's called social desirability bias. They are protecting you.
So how do you bypass that biological urge to lie?
You ask for the cash up front. Compliments are sweet, but cash is reality. The dynamic of the conversation completely shifts the second you ask for payment.
Really?
Oh yeah. Picture this. Oh, you love my idea for this new app. That is so great to hear. Early access costs $20 and I can swipe your card right now. Would you like to buy it?
Oh, I bet they get real quiet.
Watch what happens to their body language. Suddenly they hesitate. Suddenly they remember they have a similar app already, or they realize they don't actually need it that badly.
The moment of truth.
The physical discomfort of parting with money cuts through all the polite lies. Until money changes hands, you do not have a business. You just have a very time-consuming hobby. You must look for that literal physical buying intent.
But who are you asking for that cash? I mean, if you walk into a crowded stadium and ask everyone for $20, you're going to get ignored by thousands of people simultaneously.
Which leads us to number 6. Find your specific niche.
This one is so deeply counterintuitive, especially for ambitious people.
It really goes against our instincts.
It is this concept that it is vastly better to be absolutely everything to a very small group of people, rather than trying to be a little bit of something to everybody.
Yes.
When you are just starting out, the instinct is to appeal to the entire world. You want a massive market. But if you try to capture the whole world on day one, your message gets completely watered down. You become generic, forgettable noise. You have to shrink your focus until it actually hurts.
Think about the physics of pressure. Trying to appeal to everyone is like trying to hammer a wooden board with an open palm.
Ouch.
You have plenty of surface area, but you have absolutely no concentrated force. You just end up bruising your hand. Finding a niche is about sharpening the point of the nail.
Okay, I like that visual.
All of your limited energy, your tiny marketing budget, and your time goes into one microscopic high-pressure point that can actually pierce through the noise of the market. It's like trying to open a giant superstore on day one to compete with the massive established retail chains.
You'd have no chance.
You will get crushed. You don't have the supply chain, the budget, or the brand recognition. You'll just be a vastly inferior version of what already exists. Instead, be the absolute best left-handed scissor shop in town.
Left-handed scissors, I mean, it sounds so absurdly small.
It does, but think about the psychology of that customer. You own that tiny corner completely. Right-handed people won't care about your shop at all, and as a founder, ignoring 90% of the market feels terrifying.
You feel like you're leaving all this money on the table.
Exactly.
Ah.
But left-handed people, they struggle with regular scissors every single day. They have a persistent daily headache. When they find your highly specialized shop, they won't just like you. They will become fiercely, irrationally loyal.
Because you actually get them.
Because you finally solve their specific pain, you build a deep, unshakable trust with that small, concentrated group. And here is the secret mechanism of scaling. Once those specific people trust you, once you have that secure foundation, then you can expand. Maybe then you start selling left-handed notebooks and eventually ergonomic desks. But you must start by dominating the tiny niche.
That makes a lot of sense. The common thread running through every single one of these steps is learning to view the market as a guide rather than an adversary.
Beautifully said.
When the point of the nail bends, you don't just keep hitting it harder, you have to be willing to change the angle. And finally, number 7, pivot without hesitation.
This is the ultimate test of a builder's character. It is about trusting real-world facts over your own tightly held assumptions.
Which is hard to do.
So hard. Every single business starts with assumptions. We guess what the customer wants, we guess what they will be willing to pay, and we guess how they will use the product. But the moment the real world shows you your idea isn't working, when the cash isn't changing hands, when the manual test fails, when the feedback is universally poor, you have to change direction immediately.
Don't just double down.
Do not cling to a sinking ship just because you spent a long time building it. That is the sunk cost fallacy threatening to drown you.
And this brings us completely full circle. This final rule is your ultimate safety net against that terrible, soul-crushing garage building nightmare we talked about right at the beginning.
It is the cure.
If you actually listen to the real world, you won't spend 6 months building the wrong thing because the market will course correct you in week 2. Letting the real world steer your ship takes this massive, paralyzing pressure off your shoulders.
You don't have to carry it all.
You do not have to be perfectly right on the very first try. The myth of the visionary founder who sees the future perfectly is just that, a myth.
Definitely a myth.
You just have to be willing to steer left or steer right the very moment you hit a roadblock. It is an incredibly freeing realization when you understand that the market will literally tell you what to build if you just have the humility to listen.
That is so true.
Look at the business idea you are daydreaming about right now. Take a hard, deeply honest look at it. Which of these 7 rules are you secretly afraid to test because you suspect you might not like the answer?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Lean into that exact fear. That discomfort is the compass pointing to the very place you need to start working tomorrow morning.
I'm Gary Reeves.
And I'm Jenny Davis. Every successful entrepreneur embraces the journey. Thanks for sharing yours with Pure Biz Adrenaline.